Hello everybody, and thank you for joining LIDNUG for another DevelopMentor presentation together with Michael Kennedy. Today we're going to have 18 ways your ASP NET MVC project can be better. It's going to be presented by Michael Kennedy from DevelopMentor. Before I hand over to Michael, I'm just going to do a bit of housekeeping. First off, thank you very much to our sponsors, Orgsweb, Telerik, Inner Workings, ProSite, WinSelect Now, and SyncFusion for all of the support they have given the community in the last 3 years and for their continued support. For anybody that needs to get hold of us, you can send an email to info@lidnug.org. You can also catch us on the social on twitter.com/lidnug, facebook.com/lidnug. And also all of our sessions are recorded and uploaded to our YouTube channel, which is youtube.com/lidnug. As of last week, we have more than 5,220 minutes of recordings. It equates to 155 gigs of uploaded videos. I think it's 56 or 58 videos in total. But this one here is going to be, of course, 57. Also, our website, go to bit.ly/lidnug. August is going to be quite a busy month, especially for Michael Kennedy, because he's coming back again in a couple of days' time on August 1st, doing applied NoSQL in .NET. And we have Mitch Harpo is doing programming inheritance using JavaScript, and this is our LIDNUG and WinSelect partnership. For more events, you can go to our event listing page. It's lidnugevents.eventbrite.com. A bit about Michael Kennedy. He's, of course, a .NET enthusiast, or what other people call a code guru. This is his second LIDNUG event. He's the technical curriculum director for DevelopMentor. He's an MCT and also a founder of jetpass.com. And, of course, he is a presenter. Just a quick view about the itinerary geography for today's session. We pretty much spread all over the world, and it's pretty good to see that we have even people in South America, Africa, quite a few in Europe and in the US, and a few stragglers down near me in Australia. Anyways, enough about me, enough about us. Thank you, Michael, for coming back and presenting for us again.
That's good to be back. Hello, everyone. All right, I'm ready to go whenever you hand over the screen share. Or actually, I got to grab it, don't I? Sorry about that. So let me share my desktop. All right, Brian, coming through okay?
It's coming through now to me, yes.
Okay, fantastic. So, welcome, everybody. Thank you for coming. As Brian said, my name is Michael Kennedy. I work for DevelopMentor. And today we're going to talk about 18 ways, or maybe more generally, just a bunch of ways in which your brand new website, your MVC website, can be better. And I don't mean like stuff that you can apply so as it grows, in a few months, maybe you'll start to appreciate these things, but stuff that, from the first hour of working with your website. So when you say file new project, right, these are the things you should just go do, or at least consider doing to a large degree. At least 10 of them are probably in that category. So hopefully you'll find this valuable. This whole sort of series almost, but this one in particular especially, comes from the work that I've done with some of the other guys at DevelopMentor building our online learning platform, which is built in MVC and also NoSQL, which will be covered in the next session. But these are things that I wish we had done, and I'm still, almost daily going, geez, why didn't we start out this way on certain things? Some things you can easily go back and change, and some you're kind of are much bigger if you don't start from there. So anyway, enough of the background. Like I said, we are starting from File New Project. So when we go to Visual Studio, we see File New Project. Just like the way things start from there is where we're going to start from. It's not from down the road, right? Not looking too far into the future. Now, there's a little bit of history because depending on which thing you chose out of this dialog, or maybe more specifically, when you created your first website to get started on whatever project you're working on, depending on what was available, if you did this a year ago, MVC3 was what you chose. If you did it recently, you probably chose MVC4. Right? So some of these you can go back and retroactively apply to old websites, in particular the MVC3 one. So let's just do a really quick compare of what the MVC team at Microsoft has done to sort of apply some of the community best practices that I'm talking about here. All right, so here's some of the recommendations I might have given you for ASP.NET MVC3. So if you guys remember, there's a bunch of Microsoft MVC validation, Microsoft MVC Ajax, and all these different things. Long ago, the MVC team moved to unobtrusive validation through jQuery, but these were still hanging around, so one of the recommendations was to get rid of these unused scripts. When you create your project, one of the great things the MVC team has really embraced more than any other team at Microsoft, I would say, is NuGet. And NuGet is what's called a package manager. If you've not, I suspect most of you are familiar with it, but it's basically like add reference to open source library on the internet rather than add reference to assembly locally. And it keeps your code up to date with all the stuff out there. So there's a couple of things that you're going to want to do right away using NuGet. Let's see, we'll talk about minifying your CSS in production. Right, so it used to be you would have to run some custom tools in order to sort of remove the unused white space and comments and all that sort of stuff to dramatically decrease the size of your CSS and JavaScript, and so on and so on. Now, a bunch of these have actually been adopted by the MVC team, right? So, for example, they've added bundling and minification to MVC4. They don't use these scripts anymore either. They've added some of the techniques about moving your JavaScript around in your layouts for better performance and all those sorts of things. Okay, so there's still some that apply, but there's some recommendations that you might consider for MVC3 that are automatically put in MVC4. But if you created a project back in the past, then of course it didn't have those updates. All right, so another thing that we're going to talk about is, if you want your pages to load as fast as possible and get the UI on the screen as fast as possible, one of the recommendations from tools like Yahoo's YSlow and some other tools like that, and just from the community, is to put your CSS at the top. So as your page loads, it has all the CSS styles shown before any of the content displays. But to put your JavaScript, which is blocking download before it gets to the content, put that at the bottom of your page, so that your content loads, and maybe half a second later, a quarter second later, your JavaScript fires and runs. All right. So MVC3 didn't do any of that stuff. You had to kind of do this all on your own. But MVC4, this is just a file new project out of MVC4, more or less. They actually follow that recommendation and put the script section right at the bottom. Okay. All right, so let's go and talk about our first of our 18 items. Number one is, as soon as you say file new project, almost every library that you're using is out of date. So let's go create a project that we can actually use throughout here with our different 18 things. So here we are, file new project. This is going to be LinkedIn.net user group, 18 ways project or something like that. All right, and we'll just pick this internet application. It's the most common one, so we'll go with that. And if you wait a minute, watch here on the bottom left, you'll see creating project, and it starts to talk about all these NuGet packages, adding the Internet Framework 5, jQuery. It's a little bit slow, but that's okay. Here's jQuery UI, there's Modernizer, which is good stuff, a bunch of ASP.NET stuff, .NET OpenAuth, Knockout, all those things. Okay, so here's our new project. And like my slide said, you're already out of date. Even though I'm using MVC4 with Visual Studio Update 3, it's already out of date. So for example, jQuery is on version 2, and here's 1.8. Now, we'll talk about whether or not you should use jQuery 2 versus a different one in particular. But so this is out of date. jQuery validate is probably out of date, knockout is out of date, modernizer is out of date. If I go and add reference, all of these OpenAuth, OpenID, .NET OpenAuth sort of stuff is out of date, and so on. Even parts of the Razor framework. So if I go over here, I can say, let's do it more generally up here, say manage NuGet packages. Okay, so manage NuGet packages for solution or project, do it however you want. We can go over here, and I think it's on online by default, so make sure you check updates. And it goes and it talks to the server, and there are 3 pages of updates. So make it taller, right? 1 page, 2 page. So all these libraries are out of date. So my recommendation to you is to just go and update them all, with the possible exception of jQuery. So we'll talk more about why that is in a moment. But I'm just going to update them all, right? And until very, very recently, you used to have to update them one at a time. And now there's 2 ways to do it. I could click Update All here, in which case it goes through a bunch of dialogues, which is okay. Or it's even a little faster if I go up here and look for the Package Manager console down here. This is sort of the PowerShell way to work with NuGet. And I can say Update, hit capital up and hit Tab, and I can hit Update Package. And normally you might type something here like Update jQuery, Update Knockout, something like that. But if I just hit enter, it's going to just go through and update everything. So you can see the references on the right-hand side are changing. There's, I don't know, how many was that? 25 downloads and updates happening. So let this thing keep going for a moment. Almost there. So you can see, as soon as you create a new project, it's out of date. Now, this is something you can do all the time, right? This is not one of the things that kind of boxes you in as you go forward, but it's definitely a recommendation. So there's no reason to start with libraries and JavaScript packages that are a year old. So just as soon as you make a new project, just run this update package in the console, or if you want to see all the end user license agreement, you can go through the other UI. Okay, so we'll let that run in the background. You can see it takes a moment. All right, so NuGet is awesome, very, very nice. However, everything is out of date. So here's a little thing to remind you that you can just say update package in the Package Manager console. Of course, like I said, you can do that in the UI. It's still a little bit more cumbersome because you have to agree to all these licenses and stuff, but it's at least they've added in an update all button. Okay. And if you guys have any questions, just type them into the QA, and Brian, maybe if you see any, just interrupt me, okay? So
Sure enough.
I'll keep going. But yeah, if you guys have any questions, throw them out. Now, one thing you may consider, let me go back over here. Hopefully this is updated by now. Excellent, it's done. Okay, so let's close the .NET stuff and look over here. We have jQuery 2.0.3. Now, this is all well and good. Maybe I could even try to do something here for you guys. I'm not sure if this will actually fail, but hey, it's worth a try. So let's go over to the index. Let's just go down here. And I'm going to put it in the layout because I don't want to give away something I'm going to talk about, but there's something I need to do. Okay, so down here below jQuery, let's just do this. Let's just say script $document. Oops, ready. Give that a function. We got parameters. Let's just say alert from jQuery. I'm not actually sure if this will crash or not for what I'm trying to show you, but let's run this really quick. Run it in Chrome. Should pop up and say hi from jQuery, as you might expect. Once it compiles. Okay, hi from jQuery. Now, one of the problems that the new jQuery has, it's not exactly a problem, it's a trade-off they're making, is working with older versions of IE. So, all right, hello from jQuery, works great here. If I hit the F12 developer tools, go ahead and turn that on. I don't care, go away. Just give me some space. Yes. Okay, so if I go back here and say I want to do IE7, there we go. IE7, okay. And I refresh this. Where'd my hi from jQuery go? Perhaps there is a problem. Let's go to the console. Wait, what? $, not defined. I don't get it. So here's the deal. jQuery decided, as many reasonable people have, that supporting IE7, and in fact even IE8, which I'm not sure is a totally reasonable trade-off, but IE6 and IE7 are just out the door. Like, those things are junk. They're 10 years, 12 years old for IE6, less, but still old for IE7, and we're done supporting them. So jQuery's moved on, but I can tell you that if you work with corporate clients, they're still running IE7 for reasons that make no sense to me, but because they could run IE8 if they really want to stick with IE, even on XP. So if you're working with jQuery and you hit that update all, there's going to be trouble. So just be aware of that. That's why I said you might not want to run the jQuery one, the jQuery update.
Michael has a few questions. David Madden asks, are there any snafus that can result in using bundles?
We're going to talk about bundles.
Okay. The second question, I'll leave this one in. Second question is, what would you recommend for updating the NuGet packages in an enterprise environment where the packages are installed in a controlled environment?
Yeah, that makes great sense. So how do you deal with the update NuGet? Let me take that one first, because that one I have more clear guidance on. What you can do is you can take the NuGet packages and actually download the what's it, NU pack, or whatever the package bundle itself is that NuGet runs on the server, and you can actually set those up on a separate private share for your company. So you can have like approved NuGet packages or versions, right? You can say like, you can't just go to the, I've worked with like military and those kinds of guys, and they can't just go out to the internet and just go add reference to like random open source stuff and then run it on DoD computers and stuff like that. So what they can do is they can download these packages for the approved ones, put them somewhere else, and then in Visual Studio you can go to the package manager sources, there you go, and just add a custom NuGet server, which is super easy. One of the things that I talked about is that this project from DevelopMentor, where we're building an online learning platform, right? And one of the classes that we have here, let me do it this way. One of the classes we have here, which I'll talk about later, is a NuGet class, and we talk about how to do exactly that. So I'll share that with you guys later. Okay. So you can do that over here in Visual Studio. You can like set up your own server and put custom ones there. And this is a really good way for people who work on teams. Like maybe there's an API team and some other team who's consuming their libraries. Instead of like trying to do crazy cross source tree sharing and stuff, you can just have them published in NuGet locally, and then you guys could just hit update package, and that could take your local dependencies as well as the public ones. Okay. As for the snafus with bundles, the only problems you often run into with bundling is it makes it really hard to debug online for both CSS and JavaScript. So like, for example, if I'm over here on this and I want to know why does this look this way, I could right click, they're overriding it, of course, on there. But I can go here, talk about this later. You come over here and say inspect element, and you can see what the styles are. You can actually click on some of these and it'll take you, oops, not on this particular one, but you can actually go and like sort of see the styles and what line number it is and stuff, and that is that's much harder to do with bundling, so we can talk about that more. All right, hopefully that answers the questions. I see there's now 3. Excellent. Did I answer? Are we missing some? Let's see.
Yep.
All right. Great.
No, I think I think that's just it, Michael. Don't worry, I'll clear them up.
Clear them out for me. Thanks a lot. All right, we'll keep going then. Thank you, guys.
If you just take them once you've answered them, then we know that they're done.
All right, excellent.
Cheers.
Okay. All right, so this jQuery Migrate will add back some support for the older ones. Right? So if I were to add back jQuery Migrate, there's a much better chance that the alert hello world or hello jQuery or whatever it was I wrote. So if you're going to make the jump on your jQuery, you might consider also adding this jQuery Migrate package. All right. Let's move on. Number 2, while we're on the topic of NuGet, one of the things that is a serious bummer is if I go over here and I say, right-click, check in, right? If I'm using TFS, if I'm using Subversion, whatever, it doesn't matter. If I check this stuff in, all these NuGet things are managed in this packages folder, which is right here. You can see them all there. And you have two options. You can manually add and remove content from here in source control, which I've done on some projects. Or you can come over and say, whoops, do it on the solution and say enable NuGet package restore. In which case, if somebody checks this into source control and then I check it out and they've done this update, but they didn't check in that code, which if you enable this package restore, you probably shouldn't check it in. When I do a build, it'll automatically go and pull these down. So it makes sort of working on teams and a source control and NuGet thing, they all kind of come together much better there. There's one more thing you've got to do. I think it's still, again, in this area, package manager, general. You have to make sure you check allow NuGet to download missing packages during build for this to actually have any effect. So this is a per developer setting, and then this is a per project setting, right? They can kind of have to both be turned on. Okay, excellent. Number 3, put your CSS on the top and your JavaScript on the bottom. Right? Modern web apps use a ton of JavaScript, and even if it's bundled, these JavaScript requests, unless you explicitly go and mark the script tag as asynchronous and things like this, they block the downloading of the remaining content. So if you want your page to snap and come up as fast as possible, you want your JavaScript on the bottom, but your CSS on the top. So if we go look at the layout here, which I was playing with, let's get rid of this thing. Yes, it's just for the migration fit. Okay, you can see, if I get rid of that, you can see at the top here, we've got render content / CSS and some other stuff, modernizer, right? This is the one JavaScript file that has to go at the top in order, it has to be in the head. Basically adds backwards compatibility for HTML styling, HTML5 tag styling to older browsers. And then down at the bottom, we've got, well, bottom, render. Now this is not just, this one just adds the jQuery bundle. You might want to add some more. And then this also does a render section, an optional script section that we can then add into other pieces. Okay? So you want to make sure you take advantage of this. Don't add, this is not exactly an improvement per se, but it's pointing out an improvement MVC is made, and you want to make sure that you work with it, right? So don't start adding your JavaScript files up here because jQuery is not defined, and you're probably using that, and you're kind of fighting the system. So just put your additional bundles down here, among other things that you might do, okay? All right, so that's a pretty easy one. Now, like it says here, modernizer special. There's a couple of things we'll come back to on that later as well as we get into some more details. Okay. So another thing is related to sort of NuGet and all this JavaScript and stuff is all these files that you end up in your script folder. So see all these files here? Let me go back to my working version. And look, there's a scripts folder, and then in the scripts folder we have all these files. Now, if we have like 4, 5, 20 additional JavaScript files that are also ours, that basically make up the logic, the client-side logic of our app, and we intersperse it with these, then it's going to be really hard to find our code because you don't want to edit this, you don't want to mess with this, you just want to say NuGet update, and it's going to add and remove content from this folder. So what I would recommend is that you just pretend this script folder is read-only, right? It is not for you. This is something else done by Visual Studio, and you just leave it alone, kind of like you wouldn't go and put stuff in the properties folder most likely. Okay, so I'd recommend that you create a new folder like this called JS or something like that, and then put your content in here, right? So let's say add a JavaScript file, the site, let's call it core.js. Okay, so now even though there's all these NuGet things that are coming and going as you work with it, there's this core file that this is our stuff, right? Make sense? Hopefully. So not a big deal, but I'd tell you once you have like 10 of them and they're all interspersed in here and you've got additional plugins you've added, it's just not fun to try to like always peel them apart. So keep them separated. Don't commingle them. All right, number 5. So now we get to the bundling and minification that you guys were asking about. So MVC4, really ASP.NET 4, 5, is that what it was, I believe, introduced the concept of bundling and minification. So if we go over here and look at our app start, you can see this bundle config bit here. And here there's
Okay, somebody with an unmuted mic.
I'm sorry, it wasn't clear enough to tell if it was a background talk or a question. All right, so we've got this sort of bundle for jQuery, we've got a bundle for jQuery UI, and we've got a bundle for jQuery Validate. And you can see, excuse me, they do some really cool tricks here with the curly version. So when you update your stuff from like jQuery 1.9 to jQuery 2.0.3, then it just automatically picks it up. Okay, so very nice there. You can include your own as well at the bottom. Here's some CSS bundles. All right, so if you want to use these, go ahead. That's definitely a reasonable thing to do. All right, so you can see that those are being used here, right? We talked about bundling. If we maybe wanted to do, if we're going to also use jQuery UI and jQuery Validate, we would just go and do like so, I think. Make sure the name's right. jQuery UI Validate. Yep. Okay, so one, leverage the stuff that's there. Two, you can put your own JavaScript files in here. All right. Number 6. You can add better jQuery Intellisense than Visual Studio often gives you. Now, sometimes it sort of behaves better, sometimes it behaves less well, and I'm not really sure why. But let's go over here and just write this code again that we had in the beginning. Let's say over here we had something like $sign. Now here's our selector, right? You can see it knows that there's jQuery, and it knows that there's a parameter called a selector. So I could say document, and then I could have a context, but I won't use it. But it knows that there's a function called ready, and that ready takes a function, a wait function. So over here I can say alert, or whatever, right? So you can see there is Intellisense, but it's not super good. So one thing you can do is you can go and get the Intellisense file from the VS-Doc file here. Let's say save this as, where's my file? Let's put this actually here. Save this as jQuery -1.9-vsdocs.js. Okay, so if I go over here and I make this part of my project, not by doing that, but by saying show all files, include in project, and then if I go over here to my references and I say use that, right, just drag and drop, use that, save everything, and I come back, I should be able to do better. So if I go over and type this again, I can say $. Ooh, look at that. That's nice, right? Okay, document. And then if I come here and say ready, get that to come up. Here's a function that executes when the DOM is fully loaded, and you can see off we go, right? Very nice. So if I come over into this thing, I say keep my function, I can come there and say like $.post. All the Intellisense is there now. Okay. There's other ways to do that with like the Intellisense file, but it sometimes just doesn't seem to work, and this always seems to be foolproof. So anyway, I've come to just start doing that on my projects as well. All right, just download that, save it. It doesn't run, it's just a documentation file. You don't have to deploy it. Okay, I see there's 2 questions. Let's see what they are. What happens if you try to update jQuery UI via NuGet? I'm using a custom theme which was built with a theme roller. Aha, that is a problem. So that's a great question. You can go to, there's several things you can sort of create custom versions of, custom smaller versions like jQuery UI than just the default that comes on NuGet. Then I would say remove the reference using NuGet here. So let's go over here and say manage NuGet packages, and then go to install packages, and I would uninstall jQuery UI, and then I would manually copy the files over, so because you don't want it to like overwrite the existing one. Okay. All right. Now there was another question. Any recommendations on how to handle bundling of jQuery when third parties included in the head? So I haven't worked with Kendo UI. I know Kendo UI is pretty cool, and I've looked at it, but I haven't actually used it on how that it's being put up there. So I don't know if there's a way to possibly put Kendo UI down at the bottom of the page as well. So like in this, could you possibly down here, like put Kendo UI and then jQuery out there? If not, I would probably just put it at the top, right? It totally works. It's just a little bit slower, and if Kendo UI requires it to be at the top, then put it at the top. But I would first try to put Kendo UI here, like so. You know, create a custom bundle for it or whatever and put it there.
You've got one more there as well, Michael.
Excellent. Any advantage to creating one huge bundle? Yes, there is an advantage to creating one huge bundle. So like I could tweak these. If I knew I was using jQuery UI and jQuery Validate, I could just have something called like jQuery everything or something, which is all three of those combined. And the difference is you won't really see it when you're running it in debug mode locally. So if I say view page source and I go to the bottom, you can see it just says, actually let me refresh that. There you go. You can see it actually spits out all the files, but if I go and publish this to the server, it will compress these down into a single bundle, a single request per bundle. So it'll be like a GUID hash ID looking URL there for that. And in that case, you basically, if you have one bundle instead of three, then you have one additional request to load the JavaScript instead of three. And most of the latency of loading these files is not the download because they're small. It's more like the additional connection to the server, and the browsers only, if they behave well, only do 2 connections per tab per server, things like that. So yeah, there's definitely benefits to doing it.
2 more.
All right, excellent. Keep them coming. Okay. Does NuGet or 2012 have a way to remove unused script and references? Not necessarily related to publication, but let me drop this UI bit here. I could go over here and I could say manage NuGet, and if I'm not using jQuery UI like this, which is actually quite huge, because there's a bunch of, there's the one JavaScript, but if I go to content, then there's all of these files. And this is all jQuery UI, so that's a lot to publish. So if you just hit manage and uncheck it like that and hit OK, it is going to be uninstalled in a moment. Well, my folder's gone because all it's gone, right? So that's another recommendation is if you're not using something, take it out, because you're gonna have to store it in version control, and you're gonna have to publish it and all that kind of stuff. So yeah, that's a really good point. Almost could be an additional slide for my how do you make sure you use NuGet. This could also say and uninstall the stuff you're not using. Okay, so number 7. Moving on. Do I have another?
I think there's still one left.
Yeah. Okay. Can you suggest? Yeah, thanks. There is. Can you suggest a solution to rendering JS from templates? Input templates into the script section. Yes, I totally can. Let's hold that for a moment, and we'll get right back to it. But yeah, that's a good point. I can. Yeah. Okay. So, number 7. Use a CSS reset file. I don't know how many of you guys have heard of this, but this is also related to another one down the road called the CSS front-end framework. So you should totally start from here. Now, as you guys all probably know, browsers interpret and style stuff differently. They're getting better about how they work, but every browser has their own special way of showing a button, their own way of like padding an H1, all these different things, and that's how you end up with things that are off by a pixel or two and just look a little wrong on a certain browser, and you fix it in one place, it goes wrong in the next, and those sorts of things. So you can use this thing called a CSS reset file. So if you go over here, oops, no, that's not what I want to do. It's just a picture. So you see in this picture, like here's just something looking totally different in 2 browsers. Okay, so you can fix this by using this thing called a CSS reset file. So there's a bunch of different ones. One called Reset CSS by Eric Meyer, which was the one that sort of set the way for all of this, brought up the idea of a reset CSS in the first place, and then there's a bunch more. So if you go over here, you can actually see there's a couple of them where you can download the code and try them out. So for example, Normalize CSS looks like this, and basically what it does is it goes through every single element and explicitly sets a style, maybe even like sets the style to nothing, right? I mean, it might go to a paragraph and just go, the line height is 1 or something to that effect. But by explicitly setting it rather than letting the browser interpret the CSS, you get a much more consistent look and feel across the different ones. So if you're going to do your own HTML design, I would say strongly start with one of these. And even though Eric Meyer's Reset CSS is the most popular, or maybe not the most popular, the original, let's say, it was really meant to be a foundation on which other people could build these like richer default styles across browsers. So I would probably use this Normalize one. I think I like it best. That said, hold that thought for a minute. We're going to get to something I would actually recommend over this instead of this. But if you want just a reset file, this is a really good one. Okay. All right, all you do is just download it, add it to your content file, and just include it first. It has to be the very, very first CSS file before yours, or to overwrite your styles, just like it overwrites the browser's ones. Okay, number 8. Create a View Models folder. Okay, so this is a bit of a something that always drives me crazy about MVC. So if you're going to build a real website, you're not going to cram it all into this one project. You're going to have like a data access library, maybe some sort of middle tier library, and business models and all that kind of stuff, and you're going to have this code here. So what you might put in this models folder typically doesn't make any sense to do compared to where you would normally create these things. All right, so let's go look at Visual Studio here. I'll show you what I would do. Sorry, just a second, you guys. So let me go to our project here. Now, I literally don't know what to put into this folder. It's one of the 3 acronyms of MVC, right? Models, in fact, it's the first one, models, views, and controllers. And I don't know what goes in here, because if this was a real project, I would have a data access layer like this. And I'd have maybe some middle tier things and all those kinds of stuff. So let's call this, let's call it data lib or something like that. And then here's where my models would go, okay? So typically I do one of 2 things with this folder. The one type of models that belongs clearly in the web layer, if you will, of architecture, are these things called view models. So let's just write a little bit of code here really quick, and I'll try to show you what I'm talking about. Okay. So we go over here, and let's just add, a little thing here. So let's go to the controller. Home, and let's add a, let's call this, let's call it books. So let's suppose we're going to create like a set of books here, and we don't care about the message, and we're going to say I want a book class, right? So let's create a class for books, equals new book. Let's actually make an array of these called books. Equals new book array, and let's say there's 100 of them, okay? We'll say for I equals 0 to 100, we'll have book sub I, books sub I, equals new book, and let's say name equals book plus I, maybe plus 1, book 1 through 100, right? And let's go ahead and generate that property as well. Okay, great. Now, if we're going to return these books over here, I need a view. Let's go ahead and create a view. Give it a moment. Go. And maybe we want to show only like 10 books on a page or something. So we'll say for for each, we could start out like this. Whoops. Model don't help so much. Thank you. Book B in here. All right. I think that this needs to be public. All right, hold on. F12 is not the same as F11. Sorry. So let's go and make this public. Okay. So over here we can import this and so on. Now, B# is a little crazy. That's why it's red. I'm not sure what it is. But let's just say, we'll have a little div here, and we'll just say $b.name, something like that. So if we compile and run this, we can go to /home/books. That's what I called it? Yes. And there's all of our books. So this is fine, and this is working with the M model of MVC. But what we really need is, what if we wanted to do paging? Like, what if I wanted to be able to go up here and say, books page 1, page 2, and have that sort of go for the first 10, the second 10, and so on. Okay. So then all of a sudden, this model doesn't contain enough information. So I need to create a specific model for this view that holds two things: the books to display, the 10 books to display at a time, maybe books 20 through 29, and the page that it's on. So what I want to do is not actually do this, but I'm going to go create another type of model. And I'm not going to put it in here because this is completely wrong to me, right? That's the models or something over there. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a new folder called View Models. And in here I'm going to have another class called Books View Model or something like that. And here I'll have a property of book array. Let's import the name series first. Just call it books. And we'll have a property called int page, print page, something like that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use this. So let's go back to my controller, which is here. And instead of doing this, I want to say, let's say var VM for view model equals new, one of these. Okay, and let's say vm.books equals books, and vm.page, we got to pull this in. Let's say like that. So here, actually, let's say, just so we don't have to customize the routing, let's just say ID is going to be actually the page, right? Normally you would probably make that a little more clear. Okay, so then we're going to, instead of passing the books, we're going to pass this vModel. And of course, we want to make sure that we use this down there as well. So let's change this to that instead. Perfect. Okay, so let's say .model.books. Over here we'll say page at model.page. Give it a little BR. Okay. So let's go ahead and see if this works any better. Oh, it sort of works, except for that I forgot to pass. I forgot to do any sort of trimming on my home controller here. So what I want to do instead is say .skip. Let's say int page equals, I need to save this down here. Page -1. Dot take maybe, whoops, gotta do times 10 here. We want 10. Let's say 10 times. Okay, then let's say page. Okay. All right, so let's go and run that again.
Okay, folks, it looks like we've lost Michael there for a moment. Just stand by. Let's see if we can get him back.
Yeah, he's just checking his audio.
Am I back?
Yeah,
You're back
back.
anyway.
Sorry, guys. All right. So what we're doing is we're passing in our books, our page. We're getting sorry about that, everyone. We're getting all of the books, but then we're doing kind of a link query to get however many we've specified here. So let's go and run it again. All right. So now we're getting page 2 and only the books that should show up on page 2. If we do 3, then we only get the books that show up on page 3. If we do page 8, we get 71 through 80. Okay. All right, so that's why you might create a view model. Now, it's a little bit of a long-winded way or long example to get there, but I think it's sufficiently useful to know about it, okay? So you very much often on real websites end up creating these models that are sort of bound to pages. In that case, this model folder makes great sense. So I did create a separate view model, and you ought to often go as far as deleting the models folder, or sometimes renaming it to view models, just to remind myself, real models go into like a data access library, and view models go here. Okay, so let's go back to the next one. And it looks like there might be a question as well. Sorry for the background noise there. Thank you. I'm glad you like it. That kind of question I can handle. Okay. All right. So definitely create a view models folder. And here's just a little example of where you might put stuff instead of in the models folder. Maybe there's a service library, maybe there's a data access library, but definitely a view models is something you're going to end up with in real life. Number 9. Define a partial view for all of your JavaScript imports. So it's great that we have this one layout page here, which isn't shared as typical. So this one layout page is great, but typically in real websites, you might end up with 2 or 3 or 4 different layout pages based on whether or not the user's logged in, or maybe like a certain part of your site looks slightly different than the others, and so on. There's reasons you might have more than one, in which case you don't want to have any variability in the order in which you include your JavaScript, or if you forget to add it to one of the 4 different layouts and part of your site stops working. All these things can be real problems with JavaScript. So what I would encourage you to do is do something like this. Create a partial view called I'd say external JS imports, something to that effect. And so let's go over here and just add view external JS imports. Make sure it's a partial view. And I don't really want this model, but it's easy enough to get rid of. So I would just put these things here and put that there. Then I would also go so far as to say core JS imports. So let's go and add that really quick while we're at it. And I'll tell you why in one moment. So we'll do this. We'll do that. And then in here I would include all of my stuff. Right? So there's the JavaScript that we use. Here's the JavaScript that I'm using from like NuGet and third parties. And then I have them put into these partial views, so it's really easy to just include them and always include them in the right order. Okay, so if this is shared across 4 different layouts and you want to go and say, oh, you know what, we're going to now start using, whoops, didn't want to go to that definition, did I? You know what, we're going to start using Knockout, which is pretty awesome, actually. Well, that's all it takes. And the whole site's upgraded, right? You don't have to make sure that it's updated everywhere and that the version matches as you upgrade the NuGet and all that kind of stuff. Okay. So, quite a simple thing, but it will serve you well as you maintain your site over time. Cool. So, let's see. Next. Number 10. Now, we talked about having the JavaScript files at the bottom, and I think there's a question actually right at the beginning about this. How do you sort of inject the right, you guys talked about, I think the question was injecting the right JavaScript templates so that they're after the jQuery includes and things like that. So let me show you that, and I see a question is coming, so I'll tell you about that in a second. So suppose I'm over.
Okay, it's one for us, Michael.
All right, great. So suppose I'm over in, like, let's say my home about here. Suppose we're going to do something special, like if I wanted to just say, you know, add some script or, you know, put something that has to come after the JavaScript here, right? If I write it like this and say $document .ready, which I get better Intellisense for at least, but still, I give it a function here and I try to run this and I say alert too early. Too early. Is that a thing? How about too early? Okay, so if we run this again, and we wait a moment, all right, there's no alert. If I actually go and open my dev tools, you'll see there's a little error right here, and it says uncaught reference $sign is not defined. That's because if you actually look at the view page source, first I run my jQuery, and then I include it. That should be a red flag. So of course they when they created these new layouts, they thought of this. So all you got to do, whether or not this is including a template, a partial view, a JavaScript file, whatever, you can do use this section feature, and the section actually let's see. This gives me no help. So hold on. Let me just drop what I pasted so I don't lose it. So if we say section scripts over here, like they've done, we rerun this. You can see now it's done the JavaScript and then it's imported our stuff. All right, so there's these special injection points for JavaScript. So if I go back and I run my page again, I should get it working. Oop, too early. Not anymore. Make sense? So I'm not sure if that's an actual standalone additional tip, but make sure that you are leveraging this as you add additional things. So hopefully that answered that question. And I would go so far as to go and do this as well, and this is what I do on my site. I don't control the MVC template, so I didn't do it. I would do exactly the same thing that they had here, but I would put it at the bottom. So I would say additional CSS, something like that. So if you want to, like, on a certain page, drop in some CSS after the main CSS, to kind of customize something for like a little part of your site, you could do the same trick as I did with JavaScript. Okay? All right, let's see what that question is.
I was just going to say there's one there for you.
How is the... Okay, so great question. So how is using a partial view for the JavaScript better than strict bundling? The benefit is really that if you have multiple layout pages, then this is more controllable, because what I find is you might have like a public layout, and you might have like an authenticated layout page, or maybe an administrator layout, and there's like different stuff that's shown there, right? So what you'll see is you'll see the same stuff that looks like, if I go to my external layouts, right, you'll see like a whole bunch of these bundles listed there. And you know, you want to be able to maintain them in just one place, sort of the dry principle. Now, I guess what you're maybe getting at is, why not just have like a slash bundle slash JavaScript and a slash bundle slash CSS that is literally everything? The problem I see with that is if some page wants to opt out of including some of the JavaScript or CSS, or you want to vary it a little bit, then that's a real big problem, because there's no way to do that. And it's, you know, you could write like an if statement in here, like if the user is logged in, also include something else. They're kind of closely related, but so I see where you're going, how you might be able to keep it simple there as well. But I still prefer a little bit more control in the CSHTML, but you could go either way. Okay, well, let's keep going. All right, number 11, set up web deployment for your project. So if you guys are not using web deployment, if the way that you deploy to the server is to use FTP, or if it's to copy files, like go to your project folder and copy them, you're probably doing it wrong. So you can go over here, and once you install the right stuff on your server, you can right-click here and say publish, and it'll go talk to your server over SSL over a special port, and it'll basically say what files are on the server, what files I have locally, how are they the same, how are they different, and you only push up the ones that are different. So, for example, our website at DevelopMentor or LearningLine, either of those sites, if we want to publish them, we go here and we click Publish. And we might have a staging version and a production version. We can publish them to different servers, and it's always just like one button click, only send the delta. There's drawbacks and weaknesses to this thing, but it's much better than like FTP or copying yourself. So if you click this link, by the way, the slides are available in the handouts little thing, that sort of 3 files in the top right of your UI. If you click this link, you can go install the stuff needed on the server. It's a little bit of a pain to set up, but once you get it set up, you just ignore it and use it over and over.
Another queue there for you.
Yeah, you got it. Okay. Oh yeah, so what's the map? What's the min.map in the folder? So, we'll close this out. So you'll see that we've got these map files, and what these do is when we talked about bundling and minification. So here's standard jQuery with comments, all the stuff, right? And the min version, of course, is like the super minified, no, really leveraging the fact that in JavaScript, the semicolon is super powerful, and you need no spaces and no comments. So it's just smaller, right? Well, if you try to go over here and we try to debug this thing using like the dev tools, the F12 tools, go to sources, and we try to like step into it. If you have the map file, Chrome and some other browsers, I think, certainly Chrome, will go and download that and sort of de-obfuscate the code again, so you can actually step into it. So that's what the map file is. It's kind of like a decompilation back to the way it should look, like a pretty view of it. Okay. All right. So here we go. All right. So another thing that you'll run into is this is actually fixed, I believe, in the latest update to MVC, maybe update 2 or update 3 of Visual Studio. But for a long time, you would be over here, and if you had, so I can't demo it easily because my thing is updated. Well, I can demo it, but I gotta like go and tweak something. So the default used to be this setting, current page. And if you're over here and you try to run this and you say just go, it goes even better. They fixed it. So it used to go to just the HTML file directly, which would always give you this error you see on the screen here. And so what you can do is you can go through and basically set the current specific page to nothing, which means load the home page. All right, so then no matter what, it always loads up the right page. So that's handy. All right, lucky number 13. Careful with vendor prefixes. So I don't know if you guys are familiar with vendor prefixes, but you can see some below. So, CSS3 is pretty awesome. You can do all sorts of cool stuff like have box borders and rounded corners and shadows and gradients, and maybe gradients aren't so cool, but you can do a lot of cool stuff, right? However, different browsers adopted them at different times, and so if you've got like, I don't know, Safari 5.1 or something, maybe it doesn't actually support box sizing properly, but they've got like WebKit-box sizing. And this is a way for them to like test it out without fully committing to a final draft or something like that, okay? So in order to support the older browsers, you need to have all the variants so that everybody gets kind of the best version. And this is super annoying. What are you going to do about it, right? So CSS is great until you got to have these vendor prefixes everywhere, and the more styles you add, the worse it looks. So I recommend that you guys include this JavaScript library called Prefix Free, and their little slogan is break free from CSS prefix hell. This thing is great because then you can just write box sizing, just a straight CSS3 style, and it'll look at the user agent and stuff and say, oh, this one actually needs -WebKit-box sizing, or it needs Moz-box sizing, and it'll like put them back for you. So you get the sort of broadest compatibility without dealing with all the pain and suffering. Microsoft has some tools that will like take this code and turn it into this code automatically for you, but you still have to maintain it, and if you want to change it, then it's still super annoying. So you're better off using prefix free and then just doing clean, pure CSS. All right, number 14.
Questions in there, Michael?
Yeah, you got it. Okay. Bill, as Visual Studio updates come out to MVC, have you found your existing projects update automatically and painlessly, or you had to carefully go through the release notes? So from a runtime perspective, it's been totally fine. The only thing that was fairly tricky was from 2 to 3 because of Razor, but it's been pretty easy. It's they don't actually upgrade the MVC stuff for you. You've got to do that by hand, and you got to tweak some version numbers or do an assembly rewrite or something in the config file, but it's not too bad. But what you don't get any of is like the new layout. That doesn't get pulled in, right? It's just left the way it was. So some of these things, like I listed at the very beginning, you've got to sort of manually reapply them. Even if Visual MVC has recently adopted it, it still doesn't it doesn't help your site or the thing you've already created, so you've got to kind of apply it by hand. But usually they're pretty simple, like add a scripts optional section at the bottom of your layout and so on. All right, Mesh. Let's see, how does web dev publishing work on build servers? Can they read in this info? So I believe you can certainly run the web deploy from the command line. So you could have your build server as one of its steps on like a go to production build or whatever. It could do the web deploy, sure. So you would just have to. I think it's even a MS build special command, but there's certainly some kind of command line you can run, not just the UI. So I would, it works pretty good. All right, number 14. Coming up on the end. Okay, so do you guys see an error in this code? Because it's huge fonts and zoomed in and centered, you probably do. But it's super easy to miss this stuff. So if I'm over here, and let's go back to like my layout, if I can find it, there it is. And suppose I forgot like a quote here or something. That one's pretty obvious, right? Suppose, let's see, can I make something that'll crash? Put something like that. That's probably kind of obvious, but not super obvious. If I go and build this, seems totally fine, right? No problem, no build errors, but if I run it, of course, it's going to be less fine, as in crashing, right? And in production, it won't even tell you what page is wrong. Probably it's going to say, there was an error on the site, sorry. So you've got a custom 500 page or something like that. All right, so if you go and publish this, right, obviously because it's one file and I just edited it, you guys are aware, but as you might be changing like 20 or 30 CSS HTML files that are big, it's easy to let one of these things slip in. So if you've got ReSharper, go turn on Analyze Solution Errors, and even if this file is closed, this is kind of a slow process, so we might come back to it. But it'll give you a little warning that tells you, hey, there's the problem here. So you can see it's cranking along. It says, oh, there's an error in one of these files. So you can say, show me the errors. There's actually a couple, but some of these you can't really control. Like the CSS, Microsoft messed it up. I can't do anything about it. Now, it does sometimes go really crazy, where it thinks there's a whole bunch of errors, and I'm not sure why it's this crazy. But one of them down here is a real one. So usually it only shows one error. I'm not sure if I installed it wrong or something, but it'll show you the errors, which is pretty handy if it doesn't go crazy. I think I might have ReSharper 8, which is a little funky. It's been a little shady in terms of this. No, 7, I'm not sure what the problem is. All right, see, there's a question. To get sound, I need to cut my speaker. Okay, sorry, that must not be for me. Okay, sorry, glad you got your sound back. Okay, so if you have ReSharper and it doesn't go crazy, turn on the show errors because that's really handy. It'll find the Razor errors that are not compile errors. All right, yeah, so here you can go. It'll say, oh, look, there's one error in one file. You click on it, it takes you right to that error. It's great. Number 15. Now, I talked about reset CSS files earlier. So this sort of builds on that. And this is one of the things that you cannot go and easily fix once you've got a big design in place and all that kind of stuff. You can still do it, but it kind of stomps on the stuff you've already done. So I would strongly consider starting with a CSS framework. Now, you guys may or may not have heard of Bootstrap from Twitter Bootstrap. But there's actually a bunch of these things. And you can see there's like quite a few. It talks about what the trade-offs are, whether or not they use less and or SAS and the licensing. By far, the Twitter Bootstrap is the biggest one. So I could go to getbootstrap.com So what you can do, and they just came out with Bootstrap 3, which is more awesome than Bootstrap 2, but even 2 is good. So basically what this is a set of CSS and JavaScript files and styles and stuff that you can just use. So if I go over here, I can say, tell me about how the typography works. And they've already got it all set up to look really nice. The line height of 1.428 because that's most readable, rather than, 1 or something horrible like that, which is the default. If you go over here, there's like buttons, there's like these styles that are here, and if you just say like button success, then you'll get this green one. You say button info, you'll get this one. And so when you say big button, small button, you get some navigation. Where is the navigation? I think it's under JavaScript. So you get these little modal drop downs and cool dialogues. Here's a dialogue you might get. All right, so if I click this, it'll go like and drop down this modal dialogue. So all these sort of things that you have to build up yourself, navigation bars and so on, you can just get by just simply adding Twitter Bootstrap. And oh, actually, I meant to show you one more thing. So there's a couple of examples that people have used. So I sort of think of Bootstrap as, instead of starting from a pure blank canvas to build your website, you start from something that looks good. It's pretty basic, but it looks good, and then build something nicer on top of it. So if you look at some examples, is this it? Expo? Yeah, here you go. So here's a cool looking site. Hopefully it still looks the same. All right. So here's a site built with Bootstrap, and they've got these little animation things. They've got these little callouts. So this is actually not super customized over how Bootstrap just comes out of the box. So if I were starting a new site today, I would start from Bootstrap. And if it were internal, I wouldn't do that much work to make it nicer. If it were external, I probably would. But you can also add that from NuGet as well. You could come and say add. Whoops, sorry. Manage NuGet packages. Go over here and you go to online and say Bootstrap. Then you could just pick this, install, done. Okay. And then you just include a few CSS files. All right, so that's super handy. All right, and that one is hard to recover from because once you have a bunch of design in place, you're going to have to basically merge the two CSSs, not literally, but like the styles in a way that don't break what you've already done, but adopt Bootstrap stuff. So I'd start from there. All right, so here you can add it from NuGet. Number 16. When possible, pre-cache your JavaScript and possibly even CSS and image files. Okay, so even if you're doing bundling, you might have like 500K of JavaScript or something like that. So, like here on our Learning Line website, you'll see there's a bunch. If you actually were to go and say view the source, you go to the bottom and you'll see there's a bunch of JavaScript that we're including. We're using a different kind of bundling, busting stuff than what comes in MVC, but for reasons not worth going into. But you can see that a lot of this stuff we're not actually using, but by the time somebody's logged in, they get to our site, everything else is already pre-cached, and we have like a really aggressive caching algorithm on the server to say cache these files for like 6 months or something like that. Okay, so not always applicable depending on the type of site you're building, but if you can pre-cache these things, then that's great.
Bootstrap question in the Q&A, Michael.
You got it. Okay. I believe Bootstrap will be part of MVC 4.5. Yes, I totally forgot to say that. Thank you. That's right. So Scott Hanselman demoed at Build, the recent Build conference, that Bootstrap is the foundation of the UI default look and feel in MVC 4.5. Yes, thank you. That's awesome. And just one more reason to choose Bootstrap over the others, and it's really nice stuff that they're doing there. Okay. Second to last one. Let's see what we got. Oops. All right, so use JavaScript namespaces. So as your site grows, you want to put things in place that make this simple to maintain and simple to keep track of. And so this one and the next one are related. So you can see at the top we're defining a JavaScript variable called site, and that's actually the namespace. And we're setting it equal to either if somebody's already like initialized this and done something with it, just to the same value, or a brand new empty object, which is the second part. And then we're setting up a bunch of functions and properties and stuff on here. So we might have a function called site.setUpToClick and so on. There's a bunch of different techniques you can use in JavaScript to not pollute the global namespace. But this one is really nice, you know, similar to what they're doing with jQuery and so on with the $, right? There's not a whole bunch of different things added to the namespace. There's just $ and jQuery, I guess. And then from there, everything built on it. All right, so that's cool. You also get Intellisense. So if we go write code like this, if I go to my site.js, core.js, and I go over here, let's say var core equals core or a new object, depending on what it is. And I can say core.startup equals function, something like that, and I'll just say alert starting up, something like that, right? Down here I can say, let's just say $document.ready. I can say things like core dot, and you actually get Intellisense, so like startup and so on. So as not only do you get the benefit of not messing up the namespace, but you get sort of autocomplete. So let me add one more. So let's say shutdown. Shutting down, shutting up, down. So we could say startup and shut down. So it really makes things a little bit nicer to work with in terms of like gives you Intellisense and it's sort of, you know, all the benefits that namespace gives you, but as well as not polluting things. So I do this often, and it's nice to get started because once you've written a bunch of code in JavaScript, you don't want to go back and like retrofit it this way. So that's pretty handy. And combine this with another feature, and you'll see we'll get even more goodness out of it. Okay, so the last one, 18, is catch and avoid multiple JavaScript file loads. So if you just have a single bundle or the partial view and you stick those into the layout and you just don't touch them, things are safe. But as your site grows, you might conditionally be pulling in other JavaScript files, and as you move things around, you might end up accidentally including two JavaScript files, or the same JavaScript file 2 times. Okay, so this is the problem, and here's a little bit of code that uses namespaces to detect if a JavaScript file has been loaded or not. So here's the blog post, an example I wrote on it. So let me just pull this up for you. All right, so if I go down here, I've got a bad example and a good example. Let's see, where's my bad example? Here it is. So this is JS Fiddle, which lets you run sort of JavaScript HTML. Just share that. So if I go over here, you can see we included our script, and then we accidentally included it 2 times, right? Now, you wouldn't do it side by side, right? But like nested layouts and all sorts of stuff might make this happen. So what happens, what the code does, you can see down here, when somebody clicks on it, on this button, they go and they clear out the, or they get the value that's in the name field, and then they append a div, if they don't mess it up, they append a div that says, hi there, so-and-so. If I say my name's Michael, it says, whoa, why did it do that 3 times, right? And so because I messed up with the DOM, it's obvious that I did something wrong 3 times or something. But what if I'm sending an email or posting a form, right? Like, why did I bill my credit card 3 times? I didn't mean to do that, you know? But maybe there's no errors on the server, right? It could be something like this. So if we go back here and we say, you know, use the version that runs basically the code that was on my slide at the beginning, there's a bit here. And this also still includes the file a certain number of times. Okay, so if we say, hi there, Michael, all right, only 1 time. You can see that we're still including it 3 times, but actually there's no problem, right? Because it uses the namespace concept that we were just talking about here. Pull this up and make it bigger. This, yeah, and it sort of stores a have I loaded this namespace and only allows it to really get created once. Okay, so anyway, you can take that and use it. So any questions? Okay, great. So in summary, what did we talk about? What were the 18 ways? The first one is, as soon as you say file new project, your NuGet packages are out of date. So just be sure to run update package. Similarly related to that is if you're using version control, NuGet and source control don't work so awesome, so turn on NuGet package restore. For performance reasons, put CSS at the top, JavaScript at the bottom. See, there's a question. I'll get that in a second. Don't commingle your JavaScript with NuGet's because you can't really affect or move or manage their files. It's got to be right there. So don't subject yourself to like trying to parse through all those files. Put it somewhere else. Add real JQuery Intellisense by downloading the VS Doc file, as you saw I did. There's a link in the slides. You can download the slides, like I said. All right, we talked about CSS resets and browser inconsistencies. You can remove a lot of inconsistencies by simply using one of these reset files. Okay. Create and use view models, and don't put them in the models folder. Create a view models folder and either rename the model one, delete the model one, or just don't use it for that purpose. Put your models in a proper second DLL or something like that. Define a partial view for all of your JavaScripts, or if you really want to, you can use bundling and just create one enormous bundle. That would also work. All right. Put your JavaScript at the bottom of the page and make sure that you leverage the section. Right. That's really why this is a separate bullet point. Is make sure when you inject additional JavaScript that you actually put it into that special JavaScript section, not just in your HTML. Set up web deploy so you can easily one-click publish, much less likely to cause problems with the way you're publishing and problems with the server and so on. You don't really need to do number 12 in the newest version of Visual Studio, but change your project startup page to just a specific page which has no URL or anything. That's just like slash, which is great. Don't subject yourself to having to deal with vendor prefixes, so use prefix-free, that JavaScript library. Turn on resharpers, analyze errors. Consider a CSS front-end like Bootstrap, which, like you guys pointed out, is going to be part of MVC 4.5, or not MVC 4.5, but MVC 5, I believe. The next one that's coming, because it's already MVC 4. When possible, pre-capture JavaScript, use JavaScript namespaces, and make sure you put in some checks and balances to avoid multiple JavaScript file loads. All right, so I have one more thing for you, but let me take the question. When deploying third-party tools like Telerik, while getting a dev boost, is there an application performance trade-off between all the added code and scripts and references versus deploying it yourself? Developing yourself, sorry. Oh yeah, there's definitely a trade-off. And I think actually the trade-off comes in sort of complexity versus simplicity. Like some of these third-party tools, which, you know, I'm not going to call any out by name or whatever, it doesn't really matter. Some of them are so much trying to solve every single problem that they're just, you know, there's just lots of code and lots of properties and lots of stuff. And, you know, by the time you learn the API, you could have written a simpler version potentially, depending on your background. I mean, if you're using mobile, right, like if somebody's accessing your site over like a 3G connection and you've got to download a meg of JavaScript and HTML and CSS, that's actually quite big. So there's definitely a trade-off, but that doesn't mean don't use it. Okay, so that's the summary. Now, one thing I did for the last LinkedIn user group is I gave away a free class on LearningLine. And like I said, LearningLine is developers' online platform. Many of the things in this talk are things I either eventually did or wish I did for LearningLine. Even a few of them I actually did at the beginning. But it's sort of stuff that became painful, and I'm like, geez, I should have done this from the beginning. So here's the URL. If you guys want this, you just email me. But I can also, let's see, whoops. Oh, it's not actually a URL, is it? Let me go and copy it. I'll put it into a little chat window for you guys. Let's see. So let me see if I can get this to come down. Is there a chat?
There's a note on it.
Anyway.
Put a note on the top right.
Yeah, let's see. I think I have to stop sharing there because it's not. Anyway, I can post this later on for you guys. Just send me an email. It's just /cu/LIDNUG-18ways-Kennedy. So if you guys want to do more MVC afterwards, check that out. Here's my Twitter, my blog, and you know, generally, thank you for coming. Hopefully you enjoyed the presentation and found some useful takeaways for it. And if you have any questions, you know, I'm open for questions and comments.
Fantastic. Thanks, Michael.
Yeah.
I like some of the comments we got in the Q&A about it was a fantastic session and you're doing really good.
Thank you very much.
Not surprising. You've been doing this for a while.
Indeed.
Just before everybody heads up, I just want to remind you that Michael is back again on the 1st of August.
2 days.
That's in 2 days' time from now. And it's a NoSQL in ASP .NET, I believe it was.
Yeah, MVC will be involved, but mostly NoSQL. Can I put a link here on? Yeah, I will try to put the link here. Let's say, can I say reply to all? No. I'll try to put it for you. Yeah, so those of you guys who said thanks, I really appreciate it. Let's see. You're welcome, guys. Glad you liked it. Actually, let me stop sharing my screen, then I can post the link for you. Hold on. Let me share this.
Actually, if you share the web page, Michael, the members can actually just grab the URL straight out of the address bar and put it into their own browser.
Yeah, even better. All right, let me do it that way. I share a web page. Oh, fantastic. Your web page. Oh, my version of IE is really out of date. That's all right. Just ignore that. But you guys can just grab it out of there. You should be able to just click. Keep going. Yeah, perfect. Okay. So there you have it. Thanks, everybody. I'm glad you came. Thanks for the questions. And those of you that said thanks, you're most welcome. And we'll be back in 2 days to do it again.
Thank you. Fantastic. All right, guys. Thank you, everybody. And we will see you in a couple of days, I expect. Appreciate everybody coming in here today. And thank you for all the questions you've been posing.
All right. Signing off. See you guys. Thanks again.